විම් දියර මිලිලීටර් 100 ස්මාර්ට් පැක් එක රුපියල් 85ට දැන් වෙළඳ පොලේ.
හරිම සුළුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Thursday the 9th of March 2023. Commitment. Debt restructuring strategy will be announced in April to describe how medium to long-term debt targets will be met, says Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe. Priorities. We do not want to prevent the holding of the LG polls, says State Minister Ranjit Siamalapitiya. The Environment Minister calls on to hold polls after economic recovery. Collective effort. China calls on bilateral and multilateral creditors to proactively assist Sri Lanka's debt restructuring.
Alliance Finance මෙතුරු රන්නයි සේවාවෙන් රන් පවුම්කට රුපියල් 1,70,000ක ඉහළ අධිකාරමක්.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. New top story for tonight, a spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry called on Sri Lanka's commercial and multilateral creditors to take part in the country's debt restructuring process. Elaborating further, the spokesperson said that while China sees this as a necessity, they're also ready to work with the relevant countries and international financial institutions to jointly play a positive role in helping Sri Lanka navigate the situation, ease its debt burden and achieve sustainable development. On the 7th of March, President Ranil Wickremesinghe announced in Parliament that the Export-Import Bank of China had provided Sri Lanka with financial assurances needed to proceed with the International Monetary Fund's EFF facility. On the same day, the IMF announced that Sri Lanka, being able to secure financing assurances from all major bilateral creditors, has paved the way for the IMF board to consider approval for a long-awaited $2.9 billion four-year bailout package agreed on the 20th of March that was agreed on last year. Publishing excerpts from the letter, Reuters pointed out that China had expressed its willingness to expedite the negotiation process with Sri Lankan authorities regarding the medium and long-term debt period in the coming months. In this backdrop, Foreign Minister spokesperson Mao Ning said that they see the necessity of fair burden sharing, while also believing that both commercial and multilateral creditors should take part in Sri Lanka's debt restructuring. She made these remarks in response to a question posed by a journalist during the regular media briefing held yesterday. Mao went on to say that China is ready to work with relevant countries and international financial institutions to jointly play a positive role in helping Sri Lanka navigate the situation, ease its debt burden and achieve sustainable development. She noted that such actions by China reflect the country's sincerity and action to support Sri Lanka's efforts to achieve debt sustainability. The letter sent by the Exim Bank of China echoed sentiments similar to the comments made by the spokesperson of the Chinese Foreign Ministry yesterday. While providing financial assurances, the Exim Bank's letter further stated that China would call on commercial creditors to provide their treatment in an equally comparable manner and encourage multilateral creditors to do their utmost to make contributions to help Sri Lanka better respond to the crisis and emerge from it. Now, Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe says that Sri Lanka aims to announce a debt restructuring strategy in April with a view of revealing medium-term and debt targets to restore debt sustainability on a long-term basis as part of Sri Lanka's commitment made to the IMF. So far, Sri Lanka has secured financing assurances from all its major bilateral creditors, including India and China, and has set the stage for the IMF to approve a $2.9 billion bailout package on the 20th of March. Commenting on the country's inflation, the central bank governor expressed confidence that an inflation target of 4 to 6% can be achieved in the early quarter of 2023. During an interview with Reuters, Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe says that Sri Lanka aims to announce a debt restructuring strategy in April. He said that the staff-level agreement contains Sri Lanka's commitment to debt restructuring and added that the expected strategy to be announced will also reveal medium-term debt targets to restore debt sustainability on a long-term basis. Dr. Veerasinghe added that Sri Lanka would expedite negotiations with commercial creditors and announce the debt restructuring strategy in consultation with them before finalizing the debt restructuring terms. Further, the CBSL chief said that the expectation is to finalize the strategy within the next 6 months before the next IMF review is completed. He also said that Sri Lanka needs to restore debt sustainability over a 10-year period as per the IMF agreement, and the expected strategy will provide a roadmap to bring down debt levels during that period. Speaking on the $1.5 billion currency swap from China, Dr. Veerasinghe said that it is accessible upon building the reserves. Commenting on the inflation, the central bank governor expressed his confidence that the inflation rate of 4% to 6% can be achieved in the early fourth quarter of 2023. Now, Minister of Environment Nazir Ahmed called on all parliamentarians to support the President's plan on restructuring the economy from the crisis by keeping aside their calls for an election. Speaking in Parliament today, the Environment Minister said that the local government election needs to be postponed until Sri Lanka fully recovers from the crisis. Meanwhile, the State Minister of Finance said that this ministry has no intention of postponing the local government election as claimed by the opposition.
ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණ නියෝගය පිළිපදින්නට රජය කටයුතු කරනවද නැද්ද? ජනාධිපතිතුමාට අවශ්‍ය සහාය දෙන ප්‍රධාන නිලධාරියෙක් තමයි මහින්ද සිරිවර්ධන මහත්මයා. ඔවුන්ට මේ වගේ චෝදනා ඉදිරිපත් කිරීම මම දක්වනවා ඉතාම වැරදි. එතුමා වග උත්තරකරුවෙක් හැටියට දිවුරුම් පෙස්සම් ඉදිරිපත් කරා. දැන් මේ දිවුරුම් පෙස්සම් වල තියෙන්නේ ඡන්ද කරන්න බෑ කියලාද ඡන්දෙට සල්ලි දෙන්න බෑ කියලාද? නෑ. එතුමා පැහැදිලිව කියලා තියෙන්නේ මෙන්න අපේ ආදායම. මෙන්න වියදම. විශ්‍රාම වැටුප්. රෝහල්වල වෛද්‍ය සැපයීම්. මාසික සමෘද්ධිය සහන දීමන පොහොර සහන ආධාරය මෙන්න අපේ ප්‍රමුඛතාවය ඔබතුමාලා කියන මේ කාරණා වෙනුවෙන් මේන් කොයි මුදල්ද අපිට කපන්න කියලා කියන්නේ අපි දැනටත් කොටසක් දීලා තියෙනවා ඒකට මූලික අවශ්‍යතා ඒ නිසා අහවල් කාරණාවට මුදල් දෙන්න බෑ එහෙම තැනක මහා භාණ්ඩාගාරයේවත් මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශයේවත් එහි නිලධාරීන්වත් නැහැ කියන එක පැහැදිලි කරන්න අවශ්‍යයි.
The democratic right of the people to elect a government of their own should never be compromised. As a representative of the people, I stand to protect their sovereign right of franchise at any cost. I am not in favor of any move to postpone the election. At the same time, there are occasions where exceptional circumstances such as crisis and disasters may mean that holding an election will potentially introduce greater threats to human life and security. We should be happy that signs of economic recovery is visible earlier than expected. There is a lot of positivity around the IMF announcement and more dollar loans are expected with the approval of the bailout. I just want to bring you one point. Of course, Dr. Harsha was telling that if we don't have the election, if there is no stability, IMF will not give money. What is he going to say now? IMF is going to give now almost $790 or $780 million now. World Bank is going to give. And other institutions are in the pipeline. We are almost getting about $2 billion within this month. What is Dr. Harsha got to say now? We have not held elections. So, therefore, what they did, I must tell them, they gave a wrong image about the country to the international community. That's what they did every day. Therefore, I appeal to all the members.
Time is over.
Let us all join hands and support this economic recovery plan of His Excellency the President and postpone the election until this hour we recover from the economic condition. Thank you.
අපේ රටේ වෙන කිසිදු රටක දකින්න ලැබෙන්නේ නැති විදියට මැතිවරණ තුන සඳහා පවත්වනු ලබන්නේ මැතිවරණ ක්‍රම තුනක්. පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට පළාත් සභාවට සහ පළාත් පාලන ආයතන වලට තුන් ආකාරයකට තමයි මේ මැතිවරණ තියන්නේ. ඉතින් මේක නිවැරදි වෙන්න ඕනයි කියලා සෑම අවස්ථාවකදීම දේශපාලඥයෝ മന്ത്രിතුමන්ලා වගේම රටේ ජනතාව කතා කරනවා. මීට මාස 5කට කලින් මේ සඳහා පාර්ලිමේන්තු තේරීම්කාරක සභාවක් ඉල්ලලා මම ලිඛිතව ඉදිරිපත් කරලා තිබෙනවා. පක්ෂ නායකින්ගේ වගකීමක් තියෙනවා මේ පිළිබඳව සාකච්ඡා කරලා තීරණයකට එළඹෙන්න සියලු දේශපාලන පක්ෂ නියෝජනය වන පරිදි පාර්ලිමේන්තු තේරීම්කාරක සභාවක් පත් කරන්න. තේරීම්කාරක සභාවක් නොමැතිව වුණත් අපිට පනත් කෙටුම්පතක් ක්‍රමවේදයක් හඳුන්වා දීම සඳහා ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි මේක මැතිවරණයක් සම්බන්ධයෙන් වෙන නිසා සියලු දේශපාලන පක්ෂ එකතු වෙලා කරනු ලබන කටයුත්තකින් තමයි සාර්ථක ප්‍රතිඵලයක් දකින්න ලැබෙන්නේ. ඒක නිසා මම මේ අවස්ථාවේදී ගරු කතානායකතුමාටත් විශේෂයෙන්ම පක්ෂ නායකින්ටත් ඔවුන්ගේ අවධානය යොමු කරන්න කියලා ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා. ඒ වගේම මම ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා මා ඉල්ලා ඇති පරිදි මේ කාරණේ සම්බන්ධව පාර්ලිමේන්තු තේරීම්කාරක සභාවක් නොපමාව පත් කළ යුතුයි කියලා.
Now, during the discussion with Indivari Amavatta at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, The NPP representative Chaturanga Abhisinga says that they believe that a party with zero tolerance to corruption would partly solve the country's economic crisis, while the SLPP representative Milinda Rajapaksa explained that their party does not intend to be politically inclined in order to make the right choices for the country, reflecting on how the majority SLPP government, along with President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is the leader of the UNP, agree on matters for the country. Meanwhile, the SJB representative Rehan Jai Wickrama said that the opposition is not against the IMF, and that they have taken mature steps to help the government make decisions unlike any other opposition in the past. UNP representative, meanwhile, Dinu Colombage said that their party is confident that they will be able to help resurrect the country in line with the vision and policies of President Ranil Wickremesinghe.
We realized that the anti-corruption campaign did not really reap the expectations of the public. But how do you think going forward we can really tackle the question of corruption?
Most of the state funds has been misappropriated and robbed. That is why we are in this bankruptcy also. So when it take to the implementation of the law, what we have seen is the institutes which are supposed to implement this has been politicalized, and also there has been undue political pressure on the process that it needs to take from an investigation to court to an ending a case in a court. So as a party, we believe if we have the right political power for a non-corrupt party who has zero tolerance for corruption, they can ensure these institutes which are supposed to do this job are done independently, and also facilitate with additional laws that can ensure the things get fast-tracked also. And internationally, where the assets are stolen and hidden, we need to take the global support also to bring these things to light, because in the we have not seen any politician, any government servant, a top-level businessman who is part of this cartel going behind bars. So there's a problem to this.
The Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna has been contrast to the liberal political ideologies pushed by the United National Party. But you seem to be aligning well. At the same time, how about the tax revisions and the question of tackling corruption? What is your view here?
If you really look at the political landscape in Sri Lanka now, I see for a large extent there is a strategic clearance. Everyone agrees that political reforms are needed. And at this very moment, we all are in the same page when it comes to SOE reforms. Then we talks about taxes. More or less, we all are in the same page. Even the corruption. We all are in a very clear understanding where the legal reforms are needed, where the legislative should take necessary actions. But what is important here to understand is that politically, even though we are having different ideologies, when it comes to reforms, changes needed by the country, I think more or less everyone is in the same page. So that is one reason why, even though SLPP is not exactly the government, but we are supporting the government, the political ideology wise, there is no need for us to align with UNP, OSJB, ONPP to support what is right. And the second question about the tax reform. We have been having this wonderful life for a long time, maintaining this massive government without actually trying to feed the maintenance of this system in a sustainable way. Now, how are we going to come out of this crisis? Two ways. Number one, you need a long-term strategy. Same time, it is a dying patient. So that is why the president had to make some unpopular decisions, including this tax reform. So yes, it's unfair, but we have to come out of this crisis immediately.
Where does this money go? We talk about higher taxes. There are protests against these taxes. There should be a return for the people at large, or at least there should be welfare for those who are hard hit.
I mean, no party, I think, likes to throw taxes on anyone. Unfortunately, in the last couple of times we've been in government, we've inherited an economic crisis. Back in 2015, we had this issue, and this time also, obviously, we have the economic crisis, which means that we need to take the bitter medicine. As of last year, only 450,000 income tax files were open in the country. We have been a country that for decades we've had subsidized fuel prices, subsidized electricity, free healthcare, free education. But we have to somehow finance it. And on top of that, we got SOEs. But there's an estimated 4 trillion rupees were lost last year by the SOEs. And at the end of the day, the government has to foot that bill and keep those organizations going. We do have a public sector that is bloated, and so we have to find a way of reducing it without burdening those people. But either we can take the extremely unpopular decision and just slash the public sector by 50%, or we have to, in the short term, we need to bring in these high taxes and allow us the breathing space to bring in the more long-term reforms, which are, of course, for the SOE sector. We're fairly confident that we can finalize these reforms, liberalize the SOEs, and reduce the burden on the public.
Your party leadership talks about why your party leader is not bound to adhering to any decisions or agreements entered into by the current administration. So how do you think ensure policy consistency?
Mr. Harsha De Silva elaborated on that speech that was made. What he said was that what the opposition leader meant by that statement was that we are not duty bound by the agreements that have been placed on this government. If SJP government comes into place, we will be negotiating on terms that will be more beneficial for this country. And honestly, I don't think that there is any harm saying that, because as a political party, we are also looking at the best deal that's good for the country. Now, if you look at the fact that we have had multiple discussions at the opposition leader's office with members of the IMF almost every single time they came to Sri Lanka. And we as opposition party have told the IMF and requested the IMF to help out the country. We have also offered the expertise, even though we are in the opposition, to the Committee of Public Finance. We had nominated Mr. Harsha De Silva. So those are all steps that traditional opposition parties have not taken. Where we have to pull Sri Lanka out of this crisis, we have said that we can't really agree with all the policy decisions that this government makes, but for anything productive that we will offer the service of our members. And I think as an opposition party, we have done that constructively.
Stay with us for more news right after this short commercial break.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන් කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ටීමෝ වෙතින්.
Welcome back. Now, the Professionals Trade Union Alliance decided to launch a series of trade union actions with effect from today to express their objection to the government. They said that the entire country will engage in strike actions on the 5th of March against several measures of the government, including a new tax policy.
The Federation of University Teachers Association launched a strike action today to express their objection to the tax policy of the government.
සියලු රාජ්‍ය විශ්වවිද්‍යාලවල අධ්‍යයන සහ විභාග කටයුතු අත්හිටුවීමට තීරණය කරා.
Meanwhile, several university trade unions held protest against the government's tax policy this afternoon. Speaking at a media briefing today, the Professionals Trade Union Alliance, which represents trade unions of different sectors, said they will engage in actions to express their objection to the government for a week starting from 13th of this month. Further, they said that the entire country will engage in a strike action on the 15th of March.
Now, Sri Lankan shares closed higher for a sixth straight session today, helped by gains in industrial stocks. The all-share price index rose 0.58% to 9,703.48. The S&P SL20 index gained 0.5%, stronger to end at 2,865.93 points. Trading volume fell to 97.5 million shares from 108.1 million in the previous session. The market turnover in the meantime fell to 2.49 billion Sri Lankan rupees or $8.3 million US dollars compared to the 3.27 billion Sri Lankan rupees in the previous session. Foreign investors were net buyers in equities, purchasing stocks worth 268.5 million Sri Lankan rupees, while domestic investors were net sellers, offloading shares worth 2.25 billion Sri Lankan rupees. The capital goods sector was the top contributor to the market turnover. Now let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. Now, Bloomberg, quoting Fitch Solutions, reports that the Sri Lankan rupee may resume its decline and lose almost a fourth of its value against the dollar by the end of 2023. Country risk analyst at Fitch Solutions, Se Wing Ting, told Bloomberg that there is a potential for disruptions in the IMF program. He says that authorities have to remain committed to enacting tough reforms to stay on track with the IMF program, which can be politically challenging against a backdrop of a weakening economy and a local election likely on the horizon. Fitch maintained its forecast for the rupee to weaken to about 23% to a record low of 390 rupees per dollar by the end of the year. In a recent report, Bloomberg stated that Fitch Solutions has noted Sri Lanka's current significant external debt repayment needs. The report further highlighted that the country will need to build up its foreign reserve buffer over the coming months, which would put downside pressure on the exchange rate. The ratings agency further went on to say that the rupee may also be pressurized by tightening global monetary conditions. Now, oil prices rose today after a two-day decline as a weaker US dollar strike disrupted fuel supply in France, and a drop in US crude inventories offset fears over an economic impact of rising interest rates. Brent crude rose by 34 cents to $83.30 a barrel by 15:20 GMT, while US West Texas Intermediate crude added 85 cents to $77.51. Both benchmarks fell by between 4% and 5% over the previous 2 days. Offering some support, the dollar dipped today after data showed that US jobless claims rose more than expected last week, raising hopes that a shortening labour market will reduce the likelihood of the Federal Reserve re-accelerating the pace of its rate hikes. And that's all the news we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow for the very latest news at the very same time. Have a pleasant evening and good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.